Hi, welcome to a Further Inquiry podcast. I'm Matthew Genorio, Editor-in-Chief of Further Inquiry. Further Inquiry is a place for playing gracefully with ideas. We are a reader-supported publication for free inquiry, brazen critique, and dissenting ideas.
Hi, and I'm Khadija Khan, a journalist and editor at A Further Inquiry. Matthew and I jointly host this podcast monthly. You can support our work by becoming a paid subscriber to A Further Inquiry today. Hello everyone, today we are with you again with a new episode of AFI podcast, and today we have with us Dr. Darrell. Dr. Darrell is a founder and president of Recovering from Religion, and he is due to attend events in Ireland and the United Kingdom in late September and in early October of 2025 to speak at some humanist events, and we are going to put the link for the registration in the subscription, so you must check it out. So, Dr. Darrell, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me on, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about all the things mental health related to apostates.
I mean, this is really interesting subject, apostasy, and how people, they suffer when they denounce religion they were born into. Some people, they don't face any challenges when they are abandoning the religion. But some people, in fact, most of the people, they suffer trauma while their trauma is not acknowledged by their family and by their friends and by their community members. So your work, tell us what attracted you into this field and how you started, working on this issue.
Well, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, so I have been exposed to a lot of mental health issues over the years. And as I studied this back in the early 2007, 2006 timeframe, I was starting to get interested in what were the mental health challenges of people I knew that were leaving mainly Christianity. And I realized that many people have no recourse. They leave a religion and they lose their family. They may lose a job. They lose contact with their social networks. And that creates a lot of isolation and depression. And of course, when they tell their former religionists about their problems, they're dismissed. Well, you're depressed because you don't have God anymore, or you're isolated because you don't come to church. You need to go back to church. And that's not the solution. People are experiencing psychological and mental health problems because they lost their community, because they lost an illusion. I just was reading the other day, one of our clients said, "I feel so lonely. I have no invisible friend to talk to anymore." And to us, that sounds funny. I have no invisible, but it was something very important to them. And now they've lost that. They don't believe in that anymore. So in studying that, I realized there's a huge need for peer support of people who are leaving any religion. And as I opened it up and looked more deeply over the years, as I started building up the Recovering from Religion organization, and many people helped me. I didn't do it by myself, that's for sure. I started seeing that it didn't matter what religion, whether it was a Mormon, a Baptist, a Muslim, Hindu, everybody needs help when they leave their religious community. And they need help in finding new community and supporting themselves and creating connections with people. Because they were taught their whole life, the only group that you should be involved with is your religious group. And when you leave that, you don't know how to make new friends. And on top of that, many religions vilify psychology. And they say that psychology is not the answer, and you shouldn't go see a psychologist. I mean, like the Jehovah's Witnesses are very punitive if people go to see a psychologist. And yet, that's what you need. You need mental health support during your journey outside and away from religion. So anyway, that's kind of the reason I started this whole study and this process called Recovering from Religion.
I mean, from my own experience, I can understand this because growing up as a Muslim, it involves lots of indoctrination, brainwashing, and you are made to believe so many things which are unbelievable in real world. And that distort your way of thinking, I would say, your psychology. And when you start questioning those orthodox beliefs, then of course people around you, your family members, your peer group, they don't support you in your quest to find answers. And when you finally decide to come out of that religion or leave that religion behind, then of course there is lots of pressure. Do you think that this early brainwashing and indoctrination is a problem, and the kids should not be subject to this kind of brainwashing in the name of preserving religious beliefs? I just asked you a question about the brainwashing of children. I mean, because the trauma they have, as you just said, that they just assume that they don't know how to make new friends because they are never encouraged to do so, and they are subject to indoctrination, brainwashing, and they are made to believe so many unbelievable things, which are
Right.
very
Yeah.
much unreal in the real world. So the trauma they have after denouncing that religious belief, they don't have any support. So do you think that that is a problem, that children should not be subjected to brainwashing and indoctrination at an early age?
Well, I'm going to actually be talking about that in most of my talks as I tour the UK later this month and next month. And I'm going to talk about adverse childhood experiences as they're related to religion. And when you realize that children, when a child is 3 years old and your parent says, don't go over there because the lions will eat you, that's a good thing to remember. Lions eat you when you go over there. But if the same parent says, don't go over there because there are demons in those bushes, the child has no way of knowing which is accurate and which is not accurate. So the child imbibes both of those things and begins to act on those. And once that's embedded into the brain, imprinted into the brain of the child, it can stay with them for life. And so you get ideologies like Islam and Christianity that teach fear and terror of hell, for example. So if the parent says, don't go out in the street and play because the cars will kill you, that's a good thing to learn. Don't masturbate or don't have sex before marriage because Satan will put you in hell for that. That also goes into the child's brain. And it's when they reach puberty, when they reach adolescence, when they reach early adulthood, they take those cognitive imprints into their life. And it's really difficult for some people. And it can, in fact, create trauma. Trauma in the sense that your body is telling you to do one thing and your religion's telling you to do another thing. And the conflict, and you may be severely punished for disobeying what the religion says, even though it's quite normal and natural. For example, having a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or a Saudi Arabian girl kissing a boy is going to end up being a terrible punishment for her. And the same thing might happen to a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness in the Christian communities as well. So these things, what we've noticed in our practice is that people carry these into adulthood, and these disrupt their ability to develop positive relationships in marriage, for example. And we see people in Christian culture, there's this notion of purity culture. There's also the same notion in Islam. They don't call it that, but it's the same thing. Yeah. And that is that you must remain pure.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
As a result of that purity, you never learn the skills of how you interact with another human being sexually, or in a marriage relationship, or in a non-marital sexual relationship even. So people, both men and women, grow up with some pretty bad ideas about human sexuality, especially. And I talk a lot about human sexuality because religions are so consumed with what you do in your sex life. Islam and Christianity and Judaism all are concerned about whether you've had sex before marriage, whether you kissed somebody before you were, married, or whether you've had any kind of sexual relations or masturbated. All those things are considered horrible sins. I mean, in Catholicism, masturbation is a what do they call it? A capital sin. I can't remember what they call them. Unforgivable sort of thing. And yet it's perfectly natural. Every primate on the planet masturbates, so it's pretty natural. And yet religions say they're not. So that's one of the key things, Kadia, that I think needs to be examined is how do you express yourself sexually? How does a gay child growing up who is punished by their parents or by their religious leaders for not conforming to the strict heterosexual guidelines of their particular religion?
It's very important to talk about these things, and we have very few people who are openly challenge religious orthodoxies the way you do in your work and in your lectures. I would say that you are absolutely right that people, they carry these traumas, all their lives. And then they enter the real world outside of their homes. And the kind of reaction they get from that world is also very disappointing. People, they are not encouraged to live their life freely, free from religion or free from religious orthodoxies. They are compelled to have some sort of affiliation to some tribe or to some, identical faith group. And if they don't do it, then of course they are not very much welcome, you know, even in the real world. For example, if they discuss these kind of traumas or this kind of attitude that they have to face within their own families, this abuse and torture in worst cases. If they
Yeah.
tell this to the authorities, people don't believe them really. And for them, it's like, it's not possible, or they try to downplay, their plight and their
Right.
concerns. So I think they are like, it's like from left, right, center, it's a kind of misery that's been inflicted on those free minds.
Right, right. And children don't know any difference, so they just absorb these ideas and lessons from the adults. What I've seen, and unfortunately so many times, is people who are seriously abused within their religious family, and nobody takes that abuse seriously. So if the child has nowhere to go, for example, the pedophile abuse of Catholic priests, the child who's being abused by the Catholic priests, who do they tell that to? They certainly can't go tell another priest. They protect each other. And then worse yet, you go tell your parents that the priest is doing this to you. And the parents don't believe it because they believe only priests are godly. They would never do such a thing. And so you get literally centuries of abuse by religious authorities. The same thing happens in the Jehovah's Witnesses. Same thing happens in Hinduism, in Buddhism.
Islam, in
The
Islam as
Buddhist
well.
the Buddhist scandals in Thailand, for example, of abuse by the monks in monasteries. There's so much of this going on, and yet the child has nowhere to go. How do you talk about your trauma? How do you report your experience? Because nobody's taking you seriously. Even law enforcement. Well, within Christianity, we have this notion of spare the rod, spoil the child. Basically, you can beat your children. And we know that's a pretty bad way to raise children. But reporting that severe discipline to the authorities will get no response, no protection. There's nowhere to go to. That trauma comes when the brain feels it has no way out, when the brain feels it's trapped. And that's what happens when you have a child experiencing adverse childhood experiences related to religion. That then turns into what we now know and can call religious trauma. And there's millions of people who carry their religious trauma throughout their lives, and they give it to their children and they give it to their grandchildren. My own family is a really good example of all this, and partly why I'm so interested in it, because my family suffered religious trauma through 4 generations, and I've got documentation for that. So anyway.
It's really extensive if we go into the depths of this issue. You just mentioned about the authorities. I have observed the similar attitude on the part of the concerned authorities here in the UK. If Muslims, specifically ex-Muslims who try to contact authorities, they are advised not to talk about religion or not to offend fanatics and keep a low profile, or in some cases people, they start hiding their faces in public.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they are encouraged to live in isolation instead of becoming a part of mainstream society. So it's a ghettoization of the ex-Muslims, I would say, in the society, and people are pushing them into enclaves where they can live their lives without offending religious zealots. And I find this attitude quite disturbing.
Well, that's a huge reason why I started Recover from Religion, because I wanted to help people find new communities, no matter what religion they left. In fact, we've got an entire channel in our system just for ex-Muslims. We have hundreds of ex-Muslims in our channel talking to each other, from around the planet. So you can connect through us, and what we can do in Recovery from Religion, we can help connect you to local communities. And for that reason, we're going to be part of the reason I did a tour a couple of years ago of Australia to raise awareness for this issue. And that's why I'm doing the tour for the United Kingdom and Ireland to raise the concerns that I see about people who have nowhere to go. And I also want to teach humanists. We're cooperating and we're partnering with the United Kingdom humanists on this tour, because I want to teach humanists how do you psychologically bring people into the humanist movement. People leave religion. They don't know where to go. And they've been taught that humanists and atheists are horrible people. They'll send you to hell. They're Satan incarnate and all that sort of stuff. So a person who's just left Islam is looking for new community, but they've been taught those atheists and humanists are the worst people. So they're not likely to just walk out of the mosque and go straight to a humanist meeting. They're very unlikely to do that. So what we've done is build a bridge. In fact, that's the motto or the logo for Recovery from Religion is a bridge. We're building a bridge between the former religion and a new community that will accept you. And I partly want to teach humanists how to treat people who are leaving religion, because too many humanists says, well, I don't believe any of that stuff, and you're dumb for believing it, or how could you be so stupid for 30 years? That's not the way to treat people.
Yeah, that's true.
So we have a whole series. We have over 60 groups that meet online or face-to-face that are just dedicated to people talking about their trauma, talking about their experience. And that is the bridge. They can come and they can get peer support. They can talk to other people who left Islam, other Mormons that left Mormonism. No matter what religion, we've got a place for people. And then once you feel comfortable, once you've dealt with some of those emotional issues and you want to find new community, then we can help you find that community. We can give you some ideas where to go. We don't tell you where to go. We tell you there's the resources. You do what you want to do because it's your journey. It's not my journey.
And do you think that the growing religious influence in politics is a kind of threat to those people who are already suffering from the consequences of being born into a religion or being part of a religiously conservative community? I mean, we see that here in the UK, Islam, if we particularly talk about, then people are trying to introduce Islamophobia, by which any criticism of Islam would be considered bigotry against Muslims. And that is a kind of threat to those people who want to talk about Islam, because this is an aspect of your trauma, that you want to talk about the things that you have suffered from. Mm-hmm. You want to discuss those things in public. And if these things are like incompatible with human rights, you want to be able to condemn them. And this growing influence of religion in politics can be detrimental to the mental health of these people who are already suffering.
Yep. Well, that's why I wrote my book, The God Virus, which I'll just put and my thesis in the book is that religions infect our brains, and they infect the brains of children. But more importantly, the subtitle of this whole book is How Religion Infects Our Lives and Culture. Religions want to take control of the culture. And if you look at Islam very successfully took control of Saudi Arabia over 1,000 years ago, and they've maintained that control. And then you look at the way the Catholic Church took control of European culture for over 1,000 years and maintained tight control until, the Reformation came along. And Martin Luther blew the whole thing open, but then turned right around and tried to grab control again of other, like Sweden became nothing but, dominated by Lutheran culture, for example. And what we're seeing in the United States right now is an insidious attack on our culture with fundamentalist Christian Protestant religion trying to force religion into our schools and into our political structures. And unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, they're being pretty successful in many ways. Religion wants to infect every culture, and you've got to start with children. That's the place to infect. It's hard to infect a new adult. And the evidence for that is, the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses always are knocking on your door trying to convert you, and very, very few people convert that way. But the children of those people knocking on the doors, they are converted. They are forced into that ideology. And religion is always an ideology.
I
Ideology,
mean,
of course, can be political, but always is religion's always an ideology.
religion is a political ideology when it is out of the personal sphere, in my opinion. Whenever it is like asserting its position in political
Yep.
and social discourse, it is a political ideology, whether it is Christianity or Islam. And you rightly said that in the United States, we see a religious influence growing in politics, and likewise here in the UK and other European countries also, where religious zealots they are making excuses for bringing religion into power corridors. And of course, people who are affected by these political theatrics are mostly young children and young people, and they have one to lean on to, and they have no shoulder to lean on to in all truth. So what do you think, that how, like humanists, you have talked about a group, but there are people who are not a part of this group, and maybe they have difference of ideas, or maybe some disagreement on certain issues, and they would not regard themselves as humanist.
Right, right.
However, they want to be a part of this circle. What do you suggest, that how can uh, be these people, they can be together, or they can be work together, they can work together to build bridges.
Well, our philosophy is we're not here to convert or deconvert anyone. We're here to help you on your journey. And so, in the end, you have to decide where you want to join, what community you want to join. If you want to join a humanist community, fine. If you want to go to an Anglican community, that's fine. We will actually point you in the direction of other religions or other churches that might fit your needs better. We don't care. It is not our job on this planet to tell you what you can and can't do with your life. You have to make that decision. And so we spend an enormous amount of time training our volunteers in ways that are non-judgmental and not trying to push people in one direction or another. So when people come to us, we want to help them find the community that fits them. For many of those people, it is humanism. And that's why I mentioned that earlier. A big percentage of people end up in some way, shape, or form associated with humanism. But many go to the Anglican Church, or they go to a more liberal Lutheran church or something like that. It's liberating to know that somebody's there to just listen to you and just give you information that you then make the decision about. That is liberating, because churches do not do that. Mosques do not do that. Religious leaders do not do that. They are always have an agenda. They want to point you in one direction and one direction only, because there's only one way if you're a Muslim. There's only one way if you're a Mormon. And this is a refreshingly different way to approach life. And people need a little bit of time to get used to that. And they need to talk to other people. And they need to have peers that say, I was the same problem. I had the same problem, or I believe the same thing. It takes time. People have to move at their own pace. People don't move at my pace or your pace. They move at their pace. And that's a hard thing for some people to learn. Many humanists and atheists forget that they were right there 10 years ago. And the journey was not easy for them, but they forgot how hard it was. And we want to use good methods.
One more question. In this context, I see that some people who have abandoned religion, sometimes they become quite resentful, and they don't want to present themselves as someone who has been victimized by the religion. They want to appear as someone who has rejected religion, and now they want to just talk about religion. Of course, they want to condemn religious belief and religious way of thinking. And in doing so, they start also criticizing those people who are the follower of that same religion. And I would say in doing so, they somehow blur the line between a set of ideas, which is the religion, and the people, the followers, they are people. And they start, I would say, criticizing those people for following that religion. And I think
do.
that's quite dangerous position for those people who are coming from a place of victimhood, and then they start victimizing other people for following that
Well,
religion.
it is dangerous, but why do people do that? And the large reason is they're going through a psychological stage of having to process the feelings of betrayal, the feelings of being led down the wrong path or a bad path. And so what we see, and we actually have a name for this, at least in some communities, they call it the angry atheist stage. I'm angry and I'm
Or
going to go out
militant
there.
atheist.
Militant atheist or angry atheist, yes,
Yeah.
we have a name for it. And the reason we have a name for it is because it's so common. And what we see is many people leave the church, they go into the angry atheist phase, and they talk about how terrible religion was, how it treated them, and they stay in that phase for 2-3 years maybe. And many people get out of it and move on. Some people kind of get stuck there. But I liken it to the stages of grief and loss. You're actually grieving the loss of your community. And part of that is anger at the reasons why you had to leave. There's anger about how you were treated as a child, the abuse you experienced in your family. There's a lot of reasons why somebody would be angry. But if you know anything about grief and loss, and if you've been around people very much who experience grief and loss, you'll see that they go through very predictable phases. And that's what we see when people leave church. They go through very predictable phases. And you can't rush those phases, but you can help people, and that's what we're here for. You can talk to other people who are going through the same phase. You can talk to people who are out of that phase now. You can talk to people who never went through that phase. And, you can get a wide variety of support. And what we find is instead of staying angry for 3 or 4 or 5 years, you're angry for 6 months and then you move on. And that's the beauty, because you're not wasting this energy. You're not wasting your life. You've only got one life to live. We want you to live it with great joy and thriving. And if you're wasting 3 years of being angry, those are 3 years you'll never get back. And we can help you. I mean, ideally, we can help you get out of it much quicker. And then you make your own decision where you want to go after that. Is that a little bit of where you were going, answering your question?
I mean, it's a really, I would say, a thoughtful explanation what I wanted to ask, really. And I feel like this is a better way to navigate your anger, to get engaged with people and have discussions and have conversation. Because ultimately, even if the aim is to talk about religion, it should not be directed at people, because
Right.
as free human beings, we have a right to, adhere to whatever beliefs we may choose for ourselves, as long as we are not, imposing our way of thinking on other people. So
Right.
it should be okay and all right. And it's really thought-provoking, that your answer, I must say. And you talk about authorities, you talk about the family, you talk about the society, peer group, how people are trying to cope, with all these, segment of their society, and try to come out of this cycle, which is like, or for some people, it's a continuous cycle. Anything that you would like to say about the lectures you are going to attend, because we want our audience to take into consideration attending the events, people who are in Ireland or in the UK, and they just listen to your talk, and those people who are going through this trauma, they can come to your events and get some thoughtful or insightful instructions and how to resolve their
Yes, and that's why we're touring, to help people that want to come and hear the talks and interact with not just me, but other people who will be there, like Faith to Faithless people and United Kingdom Humanists and other volunteers for Recovery from Religion. So the primary talk I'm going to be giving is called Religious Trauma and Your Brain. And we'll be talking about what happens when your brain is impacted by religion. And I've got a pretty comprehensive approach to helping people understand what's going on between your ears when you're infected with religious ideologies. And that will be when I'm talking in Dublin, when I'm talking in Bangor, Northern Ireland, and Oxford, Oxford, Nottingham, Glasgow, and Edinburgh. In Newcastle, I'm going to be talking about sexy evolution, what the Pope doesn't know about sexuality.
Okay. That
that is
sounds
a,
really
it's a really
provocative.
fun talk. It's probably the most fun talk I ever give. Sexy
Okay.
evolution, what the
And
Pope doesn't know.
provocative as well. I would say it's a thought-provoking.
Yeah, it's very thought provoking and interesting because we look at a wide range of other species and
Mm,
realize that we're not so unique. We're animals just
mm.
like every other animal on the planet. But I will be there. You can the link I think you were going to put up has all the talks I'm going to be giving. I'm going to give 8 talks over about I think 18 days or 19 days. So it'll be a pretty full schedule and um, all the talks are free except for the October 1 conference that has a ticket price to it. But we are really
Wonderful.
encouraging any we wanted to make it free. Our donors, people who support Recover from
It's a noble task, I would say, and it's a much needed, conversation that we should have in our social discourse and even in our political discourse as well. I would say that authorities they should pay some attention to this issue because it is a very important and issue, and it's a deep rooted trauma, and it ruins innocent lives, and this should be addressed on all levels. And as you said, that local levels, faith to faithless and to UK humanists, they are doing, I would say, God's work. If there was a God, it should be doing this work, protecting people for traumas and miseries, and helping them
Yep.
in navigating their life to a more purposeful, more meaningful. So thank you so much, Dr. Darrell. It
You're
was
welcome.
a lovely conversation, and I am so happy to host you on AFI podcast, and it was a pleasure talking
Well,
to you. Yeah,
thank you, Katya.
we will encourage all our viewers and listeners. Please pay attention, look at the links, and publicize the events, and go to the events if you can. It's a very important issue, and it needs attention from all sides of the society, from all levels of the society. And with this, thank you so much for listening or watching to the podcast. And we'll be again coming with a new AFI podcast episode. Thank you so much.